Welcome to the Racious Justice Day of Action in Career Services. Today's session is being recorded and will have closed captioning. It is my pleasure to introduce NACE Executive Director, Sean Vanderzeel.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sean Vanderzeel, the Executive Director of the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And I'm so pleased that you have decided to join us today for our session on racial justice. This is really unprecedented that the 10 of the student affairs related associations have come together on such an occasion to put forward action and momentum. And I'm pleased that all of the associations have come together to do that. On a personal note, this is a topic that's really important to me and a topic by which I am currently spending a vast majority of my time on because it's that important. And so questions of racial justice, anti-racism, and specifically the Black Lives Matter movement are filtered through every conversation in every way, in everything that we do related to the association these days. And the reason for that is that it's that important. It touches everything that we do. And I hope that is the lens by which each of us as professionals in the career services profession look at this, because we have an impact every moment of every day with our colleagues and with the students that we serve. And to think about the inequities that exist is an imperative for each of us in every moment, in every meeting, in every process, in every practice. And if we're not thinking about those items, then we're really not doing our jobs. We've got a movement that's taking place in the United States right now, and we need to take that momentum and use it for good. And I believe that through our profession and our association, we are uniquely positioned to make that difference. And so I'm pleased to share with you today some of the steps that we are taking as an association to move forward, and some steps that we can take as individuals to do so as well. So joining me today, I do have a couple of colleagues. I have Jennifer Lassiter, who is the current president of the NACE board. Jen is the Vice President of Employer and Career Services at Purdue University Global. And Jen, do you want to say hi for a moment?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today during this important discussion.
I'm also joined by Brian Guerrero, who's our Vice President College on the NACE board. And Brian is the Senior Director of Career and Professional Success for Arts and Sciences at The Ohio State University. And Brian, would you like to say hi?
Hey everyone, mabuhay.
So we're each going to take different parts of the session today so that you don't have to hear from one voice the entire time. We're looking forward to sharing with you. Now, I do know that there are some folks who are joining us that maybe are not in NACE or part of the association. And so I want to make sure that we just take a moment to explain who we are, which, we are the community of professionals that are focused on that development and the employment of the college educated talent. And our membership represents about 10,000 career service professionals from colleges and universities. We also represent about what makes us unique as an association in the higher education association space is that we also have employers. And our employers, there are about 3,000 of them as a part of our membership. And that's really important to this discussion that we're having today, because what it takes to make change is a whole ecosystem of people. And in our particular field, leveraging those employers, having the ability to talk with those employers, to educate those employers, and vice versa, we're able to leverage that ecosystem to push the momentum forward even that much further. And so I'm really pleased that those employers are a part of this as well. So, as we've been talking about the importance of this topic, I do want to just talk about the fact that our board has taken these issues really seriously. And you may have seen this past week, we delivered a message out to our membership about the Black Lives Matter movement and anti-racism. It's filled with commitments that we are dedicated to keeping. And I hope you viewed those commitments. We're going to talk about some of them today during our session. And those commitments will be a part of what you will hear from us in very deliberate ways over this next year and beyond. We've also been listening to our members across the board. We have had over the last 2 months close to a dozen different educational sessions related to these topics that have been led by our members, and particularly members who are Black. And we have engaged in roundtable sessions. We've been speaking individually with members and really thinking through and planning for the impact that we can have as an association and as a profession moving forward. And so all of that information will be used so that we can be successful in fighting the systemic racism that's occurring. I think that's a good segue over to Jen, who is going to cover with you some of those commitments and the reasons that we made those particular commitments. So Jen.
Thanks, Sean. So I'm not going to read all of the commitments to you, but I would invite you, if you haven't looked already at the NACE website, to definitely check it out, read through our 10 commitments. But I wanted to focus on 3 specifically with you all today that give a broad perspective of how we at NACE are committed to focusing on these very important topics. The first one has to do with our internal operations. And I'm pleased to say that Sean is going to be hiring a new staff member at NACE, focused specifically on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And we should have that person hopefully hired this fall. So that is a new staff position at NACE that we're all very thrilled about. Focusing on some of the commitments, I thought we could focus on a few together today. And one of them has to do with generating research and content that expands the knowledge base of facts and trends related to anti-racism, equity, and inclusion. And obviously, both of our professions, career services and talent acquisition, we need facts to be able to enlighten and inform our membership, as well as produce new insights to assist all of our students, especially our Black students, to help ensure racial justice and equity. That's essential. So we are committed to focusing on research and content to generate new information for our professions to thrive and be able to help our Black students. In fact, just most recently, we've sent over 2 surveys to our members on questioning where they're at on equity, diversity, and inclusion issues, as well as racial justice issues, and asked about questions to our employer base on their job outlook and how they are addressing these issues as well. We're going to have this information to share, and as you've seen on the NACE website throughout the spring and early summer, we've been sharing a lot of the results of our quick polls to get information out to you, our membership, so that we can best inform you on what's going on in our professions. Another area that we're focusing on is professional development. And we are going to be continuing professional development as we always do, but we're adding programs that address equity and inclusion to advance the body of knowledge amongst our members and beyond to create systemic change. We find that very important. And obviously, we're going to develop a comprehensive and ongoing slate of programs in a variety of formats to inform our members' knowledge on the Black community, racism, and equity. But we're also going to integrate content into our existing programs so that our membership is learning about this on an ongoing basis. And it's part of the NACE experience. So we are at this time also committing to evaluating and revising our current and ongoing standard programming, such as our Management Leadership Institute, our Recruiting Leadership Institute, and other programs to ensure that anti-racism, inclusion, and equity are standard modules in these discussions. It's part of our everyday lives and needs to be a topic that's addressed on a continual basis. Our third area that we're focusing on is our membership model, and looking at our membership model and other systems to ensure equitable access and inclusive participation. We are going to be examining if the current membership model is effective in promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion, and adjusting and making modifications to strengthen that to help our members learn as much as they can from NACE and collaborate with each other. We're also going to be expanding our membership and partnership models to include other types of organizations that could benefit from working with our membership, and we can benefit from working with them. So if you haven't already checked out our 10 commitments, I would definitely invite you to do so on the NACE website and get involved if you haven't already in our NACE community. It's a great way to connect with others and get feedback from others on issues you're facing on an everyday basis. And Brian's going to focus on one of our key commitments as well, which has to do with our deliverables for our task forces and committees, as well as our affinity groups. So Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jen, and hello, everyone again. So in regards to the first commitment that was in the message that went out to our membership, this is really about amplifying the voices of our Black colleagues. And the thing that really strikes me is the proactive collaboration piece, right? And so as a part of it, I wanted to just share, for those that may not be as aware about what communities, what kind of avenues by which we do this. And there are three significant ones that I wanted to share today, even though I know we have a tight time frame. The first one, of course, and I see members of our DEI committee actually on the chat, which is terrific, is our association's DEI committee. And this committee is what I see as a champion of our core values relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They provide expertise, insights, and more importantly, accountability around our association statements. They are also a true compass in my mind when it comes to creating recommendations such that, what Jen just mentioned, thinking through practices and outcomes and deliverables that look at and incorporate and integrate anti-racist practices so that it's not just sitting on one committee's labor or shoulders. The second group that I would want to share about is our affinity groups. I know many of our employers have this within their own organizations, but for NACE, we have 17 affinity groups that are open to all members based on interest and or identity. So two that I wanted to highlight was our HBCU group, which is a membership of about 100 strong currently, and our People of Color group, affinity group, which is standing at about 250 members strong. Now, each of those 17 affinity group are co-led by a member of our employer membership and also a member of our career services or higher education community. So it really does bring in a blend of perspective there. And so each of those co-leads of the 17 affinity groups are now, which we're launching this year, is going to be a part of our affinity group council. That is going to be an additional avenue that will act as the voice to address systemic and or structural gaps while offering really good insight and recommendations that are going to be a part of all of our core and essential member services. So an example, just to be quick, I just met with our affinity group, our POC affinity group, who was co-chaired by Ingrid Giordano of Citi and Charles Jennings of Princeton University. And this is the type of thing that we need, right? We're hearing from them, they're asking, and really mirrors and aligns with what Jen said, is asking us to review the membership model to ensure greater access, to invest financial resources toward our professional development, in particular Black colleague professional development. And then also create clear avenues of communication by which all of our Black colleagues can be represented in professional development offerings more intentionally. So those are just things that we love to hear, we need to hear. And what I've really appreciated under Jen's leadership is that all of the officers are connected and advise these affinity groups, because we know we need to hear this at all levels, which would also include the leadership level. So I guess that said, I think I'm going to turn this over to Sean now in a second, who's going to give all of us a baseline knowledge on base trends and data that's facing us as a profession, and convey how we're going to move forward together. So Sean, I'll toss this over to you.
Yeah, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do moving forward is that we are always creating baselines of information and following success and metrics over time to understand where we are and where we can go and should go, frankly. And so, with the power of having the employer group as a part of our membership, we have an ability to really understand the outcomes. And what we know from the corporate sector is that they are focused, or at least they're saying that they are focused on inclusion and diversity. The stats that you see up here are pre-May, and I'm certain that if you were to look at similar surveys, or these surveys that these are mostly from Deloitte and McKinsey. Once they redo these surveys, you'll see that these numbers are higher. And so the questions and issues are what's really going to be done, right, to make an impact around inclusion and diversity in the corporate sector. And we have that direct link in career services back to that sector. As part of that, and as part of that collaboration and partnership between the college campus and the employers, these are the kinds of things that we believe will be worked on and are being worked on in a really strong way. And if they're not a focus, they need to be. And particularly for our Black students and our Black community. And if they're not, how do we push these conversations so that our employer partners are seeing the real data in front of them so that we can continue to push them. And I'm sure that they will continue to do the same with us in pushing us to think differently. There are a lot of topics on here, and there's a lot of work ahead of us. And we're all going to need to push forward in very direct ways. I think about the technology as an example that's listed on here. As we know, AI is built by people, and therefore there are biases built right into them. And so how do we work through that? How do we reimagine it? And you better believe there are folks doing that right now. And if they're not working in step with us, they should be. And so I would really encourage you to be reaching out to your technology partners to help them along with that as well. It goes into pay, into stronger support for our Black students. And that's the one I want to focus on next. One of the statistics that we tracked recently was related to interns. And what was really clear is the power of career services. So never underestimate the difference that you can make in a student's life. And that's illustrated right here. The more times that a student goes or has interactions with our career centers, the more likely they are to obtain a paid internship by pretty dramatic numbers compared to unpaid interns or those who never. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind as we move on to this next slide. This was a piece of research that we just published within the last couple of weeks. We republished it actually, because we think it's an important baseline that can be used for the future, which basically, there are a lot of numbers on here, so I'm just gonna drop to the bottom line for you, which is basically that the number of Black students are not represented in the same numbers related to being a paid intern, okay? And there is a statistical significance to the number. So white students, the number is right on par. So the percent of white students who are interns, who are part of the total universe of students versus the total universe of paid interns is quite high. With Black students, it's not the same. And here is something that we can have an impact on. How do we help those Black students to become paid interns? What are the barriers? How can we help with those barriers? What are the inequities that are involved? How can we remove those inequities? And then let's pair that with the slide before, which is the number of visits. So while there may not be a direct causation, there certainly could be a correlation between the number of visits and the interactions with the Career Center for those Black students. And so if we're not tracking this data on our campuses, we will never know the true answer to it. And so I would encourage you, as an example of something that you could do, is to work on these couple of items related to even this particular issue. I'd like to now also ask both Brian and Jen to just share from their perspective from the career services, working in career services, and speaking with our NACE colleagues and the board on some of the things that rise to the top for you on things that you hope that your colleagues are working on as well. Brian, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Sean. So I know some of us may have seen like the recent Insight Higher Ed article that published the notion, which isn't surprising and actually reaffirms some of the data that Sean just shared with us, that our white Americans still disproportionately outnumber their Black counterparts when it comes to obtaining good jobs, regardless of education level. And additive to that, again, not surprising to us, but there are also numerous studies around workforce development that has found, again, amplifying what Sean is saying, that our white workers are also paid more than Black workers overall. That's problematic. And with strong support, right, from institutional research, with promising and leading practices from career services around participation and outcomes data that's disaggregated by race, so that we are able to identify and magnify with our leadership on our campuses this disparity, continually raise that awareness and to be advocates on our campus, such that we are able to gain resources, be able to reallocate resources so that our campuses see us as a pivotal, like having a pivotal role in the upward social mobility of Black students, because that is our responsibility. I think the second thing that I've been kind of thinking through is items related to the career and or readiness competencies as a way to help systemic change through our profession and career services. I think, the readiness of our college students, the readiness of our Black college students is important to us in student affairs. And it is vital for the labor market. And so overall, it's not just about embedding it early and often and making sure it's integrated through the life cycle, but it's also critiquing it. It's also saying, okay, how were these formed? In what ideology were these formed? How do they apply, or how are they different when you need to apply them to other types of demographics and populations? Does that make sense? Are we defining fit in a way that should be critiqued? And so these are questions that I think all of us need to kind of think through, and career services can be that platform by which we can create conversations and that narrative on our campus, because it's again, our responsibility. I think the only other thing I'll share before turning it over to Jen is just this kind of internal and introspective thinking that I know a lot of us are doing within our organizations. It's tough, it's needed, we need to have these conversations. But it won't be systemic unless all of us are doing it. And so I also, at least I'll use my organization as an example. This is now a performance measure. We've had really good conversations internally about why this is important. Not only is it a value, it is a expectation of our roles. And so how do we create that expectation through the performance cycle, creating goals, creating the resources? So that's just one example of the internal work. And then the only other thing about the internal work that I would say is, I understand that all of us are under duress in terms of our budgets. I've seen some of the data that's coming out too. But now is not the time, and I've said this in other spaces too, it's not the time to pull back on any funding for student organizations, in particular our Black student organizations. If anything, we need to be funding more. So those are just a couple of thoughts that I've had in relation to how we can do some systemic change and meaningful change. So Jen?
Thanks, Brian. Some of you in the chat have asked, so how do you get to some of those students? And I thought I'd share a personal experience. My staffing model at Purdue Global is a little different than most, in the fact that my career staff are charged with an actual cohort of students that they're reaching out to. And it's through that reaching out that we're able to develop relationships and individualize the focus for our upcoming graduates. And I think it's essential for us as career professionals to go out and meet our students, help them understand career services as a place where they can be their authentic self, and we can work with them on their job search in a way that makes them feel confident and successful. One of the measures that my team actually is measured on is we have classroom presentations, career-related touch points for every program of study. And one of the questions we specifically ask our students is, do you feel more confident in your upcoming job search as a result of attending this presentation? And we've been tracking it for years now. And we've adjusted our delivery to make sure that everyone is staying with us and they feel confident and they feel empowered about themselves in relation to the job search. And taking a moment and having discussions with our students so that they feel comfortable and confident is going to go a long way. Now, I know, of course, with budgets, not everybody can adjust their staffing models, but at the same time, taking time out to go meet with student organizations, student groups, promoting the importance of career services and how we can help them in their job search, obviously is a given, but at the same time, don't wait for those students to come to you. As we've seen from the data, our Black students aren't going to career services as much on their own. We need to make career services a place they want to visit and engage in often, so that we can help them get those paid internships and help make a change when it comes to pay scale and equity for the future. So I would encourage everyone here not to sit and wait for students to come to you, you go to them. And I know we're getting tight on time, Sean, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Brian. That was really helpful. And we're at the end of our time, and I know that many of you are going to move on to some other sessions that are scheduled as part of the Racial Justice Day of Action. But I do want to just say that this is not the end of this conversation. We're going to be having many, many more of these. And as Jen stated during her section, these topics are going to be integrated into much of what NACE does. And so, if we're having a general conversation about something, you better believe race is going to come into play. We believe that we've really got to catch people where they are. We've got a group of you on the line, more than 600 people who are part of this presentation today. And those that aren't here, we need to catch them where they are. And we're going to do that, and we're going to find unique ways to do that. And so I'm glad that you're here along with us with this movement. And I'm looking forward to partnering with you as we move forward and hearing a lot more from you about the kinds of things that we can push forward on. So have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk with you all again soon. Bye for now.
This concludes today's session. Thank you.